Hello, and welcome to Battle Report number 17. So this is the final game in my Scottish Championships preparation. So this is basically the list that I'm going to be taking to the tournament. I think I make another couple of changes, things that I'll point out when we get to the army lists. But my final practice game is against Demon Legions, and again, like the last Battle Report, if you followed the Scottish Championships at all, then you might recognise the army list, and this was one of the army lists that was played on the top table in the final game. So this player finished 5th out of 70 odd players, something like that. Quite a big tournament. So he did very well. So it was good to get a practice game again against one of the more substantial lists, I suppose, of the tournament. Really give my Equitane a good run for their money, see what they're capable of. So let's take a look at the lists. So I've finally given up on the Humility Hippogriff, sorry. I haven't found the right weapons for it, and without taking any big substantial units of peasants, it's not really worth, taking away one of the virtues, one of the good combat virtues, to change that for humility. So for this game, instead, I've got a Duke on Barded Warhorse with a shield enchanted with the Fortress of Faith, which gives him rerolling ones of to hit, to wound, and armor saves. He's got a Lance enchanted with the Supernatural Dexterity, which gives him magical attacks and +2 offensive and agility. He's got a Bastard Sword and Questing Oath, just for +2 charge and +1 to hit models with fear. He's got the Basalt Infusion for +1 armor save, which gives him a 1-up total. And a 3-up ward against flaming. He's got an Obsidian Rock for magic resistance 2, and he's got the Virtue of Might, which is the +1 strength, attack, and AP on the charge when using a lance, and those wounds that you cause, you get to make extra attacks, which is very nice, very exciting. Makes him pretty beastly against most things, really. 5 attacks on the charge, potentially of killing 10 rank and file models by himself, which is quite nice. Then for my general, I've got another Duke on Barded Warhorse with a shield, Crusader's Salvation for a 1-up rerollable save. He's got a hand weapon enchanted with the Hero's Heart, so he's got 5 strength 5 AP3 attacks. He's got the Crystal Ball, which gives me +1 to dispel against one chosen enemy model for the whole game. He's got the Virtue of Valour, which is one of the slightly more unusual ones, I think, certainly in the UK meta. Which gives you rerolls to hit and to wound in duels, and the opponent can't turn down a duel if they are able to accept it, so you can force enemy champions and characters to fight you, which of course gives you rerolls, which is very cool. Then he's got the Grail Oath, which gives him Fearless, +1 offensive and defensive, and he's always got a 5+ Aegis. Also means that he's allowed to join my Grail Knights. I've got a Damsel on a Barded Warhorse. She is a Wizard Master of Druidism. She's got the magical Heirloom, which gives her the hereditary spell as well. I've got a Paladin on Barded Warhorse with a shield. He is my Battle Standard Bearer. He's got an Aether icon, a Lance enchanted with the Wyrmwood core for flaming attacks, and a Strength 5 breath weapon, and he's got the Questing Oath and Bastard Sword. In core, I've got a unit of 15 Knights Aspirant with full command and Banner of the Last Charge. I've got 2 units of 6 Knights of the Realm with full command, and one of those units has the Banner of the Green Knight, which again is an item that you don't see very often. Spoiler alert, it's one of the items I ended up taking out of this list. You activate it at any point in your movement phase. Oh no, at the start of your movement phase? You activate it in your movement phase, and then it gives you +2 March and Ghost Step, which is interesting. I thought with a pair of Combat Dukes, I might be able to use it in certain cases to activate it while they're in the unit and then ping them through impassable terrain, because they then get an 18-inch march, so they could pop out the other side of that. But it's a very niche item, and for 35 points I can be spending that on something else that might be a little bit more entertaining for something. So I didn't take that in the end. But it was worth trying, and I think maybe, the right setup, the right time, it might be useful. Then I've got a unit of 8 Knights of the Grail with full command and Stalker Standard, a unit of 10 Knights of the Quest with full command and Stalker Standard. I've got the Green Knight, and 2 lots of 5 Yeoman Outriders with bows. So very similar to my last army list, basically, but a big change up in characters with taking a Valour Duke instead of the Audacity Duke and swapping the Humility Hippogriff for a Might Duke on Barded Warhorse. And then let's take a look at the Demons list. So he's got 3 Greater Demons, which is... oh, what a pain to deal with that. So he's got a Miser of Sugulag, which is the... I think the Greed Greater Demon. It is the Greed Greater Demon. So he's the General. He's got the Greater Dominion, which is the special rule that he gets to give to a unit within his Inspiring Presence range, which is +2 defensive skill while its unit is in base contact with an enemy scoring unit, which works very well with the 2 Blazing Glories, basically bumping them up to defensive 12 when they're in base contact with scoring units, which is nasty. It means, you know, even the Grail Knights are hitting them on 6s when they're at full health, which is nasty. He's a Wizard Apprentice of Divination, which gives him Know Thine Enemy, and Guiding Light. Guiding Light's very nice for demons because it means they are going to be testing basically cold-blooded on their discipline checks, on their supernal checks, which is very nice. And of course, +2 defensive skill, put that on the Blazing Glories, and suddenly they're defensive 14. So even something with offensive 7 is going to be hitting them on 6s. Then he's got Mirrored Scales, so any rolls of a 1 to hit them in close combat with your close combat attacks gets reflected back on the attacker. Next he's got a Maw of Akan. He's a Wizard Apprentice of Evocation, so he's got Spectral Blades and potential of Lethal Strike. Iron Husk, which gives him Resilience 6. Then he's got a Courtesan of Sibaresh, the Lust Greater Demon. He's a Wizard Apprentice of Witchcraft, which gives him Raven's Wing. So March 18 and a potential for a 12-inch flying move. So that thing can be moving potentially 30 inches a turn, which is, again, not something you want to be dealing with, especially with long, unmaneuverable Equitane lances. So that's a little bit awkward. And Iron Husk again, so it's also Resilience 6. So, you know, not any powerhouse casters, but those 3 spells that he's brought along are going to be really awkward to deal with. Then in core, he's got 10 Lemuries with Unnatural Roots and Standard Bearer, so lots of static combat res from them, and of course they're Resilience 5. They've got parry, so they're just a pain to deal with. 4 lots of 10 Myrmidons with Unhinging Jaws and Champions. So Unhinging Jaws gives them +1 to wound or rerolls to wound against models with Gigantic or Towering Presence. I don't remember. Either way, nothing that affects my army because everything in my army is standard. Next up, he's got a Hope Harvester, which is the Engine of Damnation, so it gets the 150 by 100mm base. It also ups its hit points and resilience a bit. It gives it a longer march. Bits and pieces like that. And Sorceress and Tenor, which means the army gets to keep 6 Veil tokens at the end of Siphon the Veil. 2 Blazing Glories, 3 Veil Serpents with the Champion, so that's a Wizard Conclave. So he's got 3 Apprentices and an Adept, so, you know, a deceptively powerful magic phase, really. And then 3 Bloatflies with Unhinging Jaw and Champion. So, lots of very small units, lots of single models. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 single models, and 3 of them are Greater Demons, so not small threats to be not sniffed at, really. It's a very intimidating movement phase, and there's none of them are really pinned down by having to do wheels or anything. Even the 10 Myrmidons and the Lemuries are very maneuverable. So he's definitely going to outdance me, so it's going to be a little bit of an awkward battle for my Equitane. So let's take a look at the map. So we were playing round 5 for the Scottish Championship, which was Counter Thrust and King of the Hill. I chose the hill with what looks like a paw print on the right there in the centre of the field, and he chose the wall in the bottom left. So I've got to capture the one in the bottom left, and he's got to capture the one in the centre. We both sort of played the objective wrong. Or at the very least, I definitely made the conscious thought of I'm going to have to give up the objective because I don't want to be on the left-hand side. I don't want the impassable terrain in the middle of my army that I have to fight round. With all of his single models, that's going to be a big plus for him. I'd rather be looking at a field on the right where it's going to be easier to overlap my arcs a little bit more. So, my deployment at the bottom, left to right, I've got a unit of Realm Knights on the far left, a unit of Yeomen, my other unit of Realm Knights, the big lance of Aspirant Knights, the other unit of Yeomen in front of my General in the Grails with the Damsel, and then my Might Duke and BSB on the quests on the hill on the right. Then his deployment on the other side, he's got his 10 Lemuries on the hill, then a Blazing Glory, 10 Myrmidons, his Courtesan of Sibaresh, his Maw of a Khan, then 10 more Myrmidons with the Veiled Serpents behind them, the Miser of Sugulag, the Engine of Damnation, 10 Myrmidons, another 10 Myrmidons, and 3, what are they called? Bloatflies, and then the final Blazing Glory on the right. So I deployed my Yeoman Outriders quite early on just to push back his units. With counter thrust, I wanted to get them down soon and push back his units just further into his field, give me slightly more options and to allow myself more space with my deployment. As I said, I wanted the open space on the right to be where I was going. I'm not bothered at all by the forest on the right because I've got 2 Stalker Standards on my Grails and my Questing Knights. But I was worried about getting tangled up on the Impassable on the right, so on the left even. So that's why I deployed on this side. I deployed quite wide still. I don't think I really needed to do that. Certainly my opponent recommended at the end of this game that I don't deploy quite so wide because it makes it quite awkward for my Realm Knight units. They haven't got a lot of leadership support. So if they're taking any panics or fear tests or terror checks, they're on their own, which is, not ideal really. So post Vanguard, I move towards the centre with the left unit of Yeoman, just into a spot to try and make it awkward for the Courtesan to get around me. And the unit in front of all my combat buses didn't really have an awful lot of options. I think really I should have moved up to the wall and gained hard cover from that. I can't imagine potentially he'd charge them, but either... Well, no, if he does charge them, then I just stand there and wait for him to hit me, and then he might overrun then. And it just puts him in a bad spot. So that would have been a better place for them to go. As it went, though, I just put them sort of behind the hill, but they didn't have enough movement to get all the way up there, so they're basically sitting ducks for the Hope Harvester there. So we go to turn 1. The demons take turn 1 as we deployed quite, one and then the other. So he gets the bonus for first turn, and he takes it. He moves up very heavily on the left. Of course, I haven't got any units over there to stop him from doing that. The Courtesan moves up very heavily. The Maw gets up onto the hill so it can see over. Everything on the right, of course, doesn't want to tempt me making any long charges, so they more or less stand where they are. The Blazing Glory on the right, though, has enough march movement to get out of line of sight of my Questing Knights. So, again, first turn moves, I've managed to give myself, create a blind spot for him to move a threat into my flank, which isn't good. In Magic, he manages to get Deceptive Glamour on the Aspirants, which gives them a couple of minus on their offensive and defensive. He tries to cast Raven's Wing on, I think, the Courtesan, which I dispel. And then in shooting, the Hope Harvester just blasts off the Yeoman Outriders behind the hill. 2 of them survive, but then they fail their panic. They pass through the Realm Knights onto the impassable terrain and off the board. So, I've given away one of my units of chaff quite cheaply there, or as cheaply as possible there, which is a shame. But better a thing to learn in a practice game, hopefully. That's the end of Demons turn 1 though, because there isn't any combat, so we go to Equitane turn 1. So, with the Blazing Glory threatening my flank, and with it being defensive 10 and strength 5, AP 5, that's not something I want coming into the flank of my units. So I decided to drop the Green Knight now. If he does go into him, he's almost... well, he's got a 4+ Aegis against him, so... you know, I'm thinking if he decides to go in there, it'll bring him in... it'll bring the Blazing Glory into arc of sight of my Questing Knights, potentially. It'll give them away, but you know, I think that's a trade worth giving to get myself out of that mistake there. I also drop my Might Duke out of the Questing Knights to cover the flank of my Questing Knights. If the Blazing Glory decides not to go for the Green Knight, but to try and go deeper and behind my lines, I've got the Might Duke there to countercharge him. So that should force him back. My last unit of Yeoman Outriders I used to chaff up the Courtesan of Sibaresh from simply going to the front of my Realm Knights there. That yellow cross on the Realm Knights there is the Evil Eye, so they're -1 march, -1 advance, -2 march. The Realm Knights on the left, I do a swift reform and move as far as I can back towards the centre. I don't particularly want... well, they might have been better off distracting the Lemuries and the Blazing Glory on that flank, but I wasn't confident of being able to dance around a single model for all that long, so I thought I'd just be giving away their points on that flank. So they turn towards the centre. My Grails and Aspirants, though, just sort of reshuffle. I want to be able to look towards the left with the Maw, the Miser, and the Courtesan coming in towards me. I think those are my bigger threats than the Myrmidons and Bloatflies and the Hope Harvester. So a little bit standoffish at the moment. Post Magic and Shooting, I managed to get Entwining Roots on the Blazing Glory on the right. I don't think I get Oaken Throne off, so it's only -1, so not too much, but it should make a difference in combat. Otherwise, I've got 2 bows into the Courtesan, which do nothing. I think the rest of my spells are dispelled or don't have any effect. So we go to Demons turn 2. So he declares a charge with the Myrmidons back there. I think he needed a 5, and of course they're beasts, so it would have been Swift Stride into the front of my Yeoman Outriders there. But he manages to fail and stumble forwards 3 or 4 inches. That was his only charge, though. He was banking on, you know, I mean, with Swift Stride making a 5, that's, you know, the lowest you need without it being an auto charge with a champion in there. So he doesn't bother charging with anything else because it gives the rest of his units more independence in the movement phase, but unfortunately failed. And the Yeoman Riders are kept for next turn. Post moves, though. He makes his march check with the Courtesan and marches 18 inches round to get behind and out of the way of all of my units on the left. The Blazing Glory, of course, wants nothing to do with my Might Duke or the Green Knight, so marches away, or fails its march check, so moves away very slowly away from the Green Knight. And nothing else. Again, he's very cautious to give me any long charges with the rest of his units. I'm going to have to come and get him if I want any points. Post Magic and Shooting, I think actually his shooting is out of range. He's only got 18 inches on the Hope Harvester, so doesn't manage anything with that. He gets Deceptive Glamour and Smite the Unbeliever on that left unit of Realm Knights, which I'm not too worried about. I can't see them going into combat anytime soon. They can't see the Courtesan where they are, so that's fine. And we go to Equitane turn 2. So I want to get rid of the Blazing Glory as soon as I can, just because I know that that's going to cause me issues. So while I've got the opportunity, I want to deal with that Blazing Glory, and I'm not too worried about either the Bloatflies or the Myrmidons with the Questing Knights. I've got the Wyrmwood Lance, of course, in my on my BSB, so it's going to ignore... Let me have a look at the saves for the Bloatflies. So they've got a 5+ Aegis against magical attacks and a 5+ Fortitude. And of course the Breath Weapon isn't magical, so it won't activate the Aegis and it will ignore the Fortitude. So I'm not at all worried about the Bloatflies. I'm not worried about the Myrmidons. So I want to take out the Blazing Glory while I've got the opportunity. The rest of my army, though, doesn't particularly want to fail any long charges and then tempt any counter charges from his stuff, so I don't bother with that. Post moves, though, I make my march check with my Yeoman Outriders and chaff up the Myrmidons, the Miser of Segulag, and the Maw of Akan. And I move the Grail Knights up very aggressively to occupy the wall in front of the Myrmidons and the Hope Harvester. That'll give me hard cover against his shooting. It'll make me distracting if he decides to charge me. I can't imagine why he would want to, but you know, it gives me options, and it means that I can push into him and try and grab some points from the demons. I move up my Aspirant Knights to support my Grail Knights from anything that might go through the Yeoman Outriders, and the Realm Knights on the left move up into the flank of the Courtesan of Sibaresh. My Might Duke in the bottom corner, now that the Blazing Glory has turned around and gone away, he's left without a unit, so he moves up onto the hill to at least give him rerolls to charge, and tries to cover any of the absent angles that have been left by my units. I was concerned that potentially I might... I mean, you know, as much as I've managed to catch the Blazing Glory, it's still not a guarantee that I managed to kill him, especially if he's fighting a challenge, as he'll get stubborn for the rest of the until the end of the player turn. So I use the Green Knight to try and protect the flank of the Questing Knights, pointing up towards them. I think probably I should have pointed them more towards the centre so that I don't have quite such a large gap for the Myrmidons to sneak through, though. Post magic, I get both of the Hereditary and Stone Skin on the Questing Knights to try and make it a little bit more difficult for the Blazing Glory to do any damage to that unit. Besides that, I don't manage to get anything else off. Post-combat, I do thankfully manage to deal with the Blazing Glory, but not before he kills 3 of me. I think potentially he issued a duel, but I turned it down. So the BSB didn't fight, but it meant that the rest of my guys could attack. I didn't want to give him stubborn, so I'm going to beat him in combat on static combat res, and hopefully I'll pop him through Supernal that way after putting a couple of wounds on him. Which I do manage to do, so I reform to face up towards the Bloatflies. And we go to Demon's turn 3. So this is after charges. The Maw of Akan declared a charge into the Yeoman Outriders. I wanted to hold that because, you know, they're too close to try and flee. But they fail their terror check, flee a total of 4 inches. And he catches me and kills me and does a quick reform. So he's now very, very close to my Knight's Aspirant, so they might be looking at that and seeing if they might want to charge there. Post moves, the Courtesan fails its march check and can only move the 9 inches. He moves up very close with his Bloatflies up towards my BSB's unit. I was thinking at this point that he might know something that I don't, because he's not worried with the Bloatflies, even with my Wyrmwood Lance. So I became a little bit unsure of that combat once he moved up very aggressively with them. But we'll see how that goes. The Myrmidons, of course, have got enough movement to sneak past the Green Knight. The other unit of Myrmidons move up to chaff my Grail Knights. And he moves pretty cautiously with everything else. The Lemuries and the Blazing Glory on the far side are still trying to play catch-up with my Realm Knights. Post-magic, he gets Bewitching Glare... No, Deceptive Glamour. Yes, Deceptive Glamour, sorry, on the Aspirant Knights. But nothing else of note by the looks of things. And we go to Equitane turn 3. So I can finally declare some charges, and a decent number of them as well. So even with the minus offensive and defensive on the Aspirant Knights, I'm still going to be doing 15 impact hits, and then I've got a whole heap of attacks and a whole load of static combat res, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to do enough wounds and static combat res that I'll cause some issues, at least for the Maw of Akan. I'm not sure I'll kill it, but you know, the potential is there, so certainly it's better than him charging me, so I go for that. The Grail Knights and my Valour Duke go into the Myrmidons in front of them. The Might Duke has a charge into the 10 Myrmidons besides the forest there, and my Quests and my Flaming BSB go into the front of the Bloatflies. Post charges, of course, all of them make them in. I've got rerolls on the Might Duke, so that was the only long charge that could have failed, but he manages to make that in. Post moves, I don't think I've got a whole lot that's not in combat. I fail my march check with the leftmost unit of Realm Knights, so they can only move up so far. The right unit moves up to chaff the Courtesan of Sibaresh from getting into the flank of the Knight's Aspirant in case that combat doesn't go swimmingly. And the Green Knight moves up out of the way of any magic or potential charges and looks back towards the centre so it can try and support any combats that don't go well. And as I said, I wasn't sure how the Bloatfly combat was going to go, considering how aggressive he had been. So I wanted to make sure that I was covering that as well. Post magic, I managed to double 1 for Oaken Throne, so I don't get that off again. I get Entwining Roots on the Bloatflies on the right, and I get Stone Skin on the Knight's Aspirants. They're Resilience 5 now. So at the very least, it'll be difficult for the Maw of Khan to take off any guys, regrow any wounds, and take away my rank bonus. Post combat, it goes very, very well for me. So first of all, the Questing Knights, my BSB and the Bloatflies, we got to combat, and I said as much. You know, I'm not sure whether you know something that I don't here, but I think I've got a pretty good chance here in this combat. And it was at that point that we realised that my opponent hadn't fully gone through my army list and didn't know that my BSB had a Wyrmwood Lance. So at that point, yes, I set off the Wyrmwood Lance. I did a good few wounds. He killed a few of me with the toxic attacks back from doing wounds to him, and then I caused enough damage to pop that unit on its supernal check. The Might Duke in with the Myrmidons. Of course, I go in. He issues a duel with his champion. I can't refuse that. I put 5 strength 7 attacks into the champion, kill the champion, and he passes his supernal, which is, you know, as to be expected from that combat. But that ties that unit down there with my Questing Knights and the Green Knight ready to come in as a support there. The Grail Knights and the Valour Duke, of course, make very short work of 10 Myrmidons. And then on the left, on the hill, my Aspirants go in. I think I caused like 4 wounds from my 15 impact hits. I do really, really well with the impact hits. I cause a good number of wounds with my attacks as well, even with the minus to hit from the Deceptive Glamour. And then he rolls really poorly with his attacks back, now that I've got plus resilience. And I cause enough that I either automatically pop him or he fails his supernal check. So really, really lucky for me. That went very well. I think probably well than either of us were really expecting that combat to go. And we go to turn 4 for the demons. So a whole host of charges now. He charges with his Courtesan into the front of my Realm Knights there. They fail their terror check and flee. He redirects into the rear of my Aspirant Knights, which I don't want anything to deal with. Maybe I did hold that one. I think I held that combat. Held that charge, sorry. He charges in with the Myrmidons as well, which I then flee from. I flee out to in front of the Grail Knights, who are then charged by the Miser. So they flee through the Grails and the Might Duke combat to pop out the other side there. Thankfully, the Grail Knights are all fearless, so no panics there. The Miser then redirects into the flank of my Might Duke, because he's got just enough space to get in there, and of course the Might Duke isn't scary when he's not charging. And the Blazing Glory charges the rear of my Realm Knights in the bottom, who also don't want to have anything to do with that, so they flee through the impassable terrain. They lose a knight and a champion, but they manage to get away. So post charges, he makes it in with the Miser, but unfortunately he fails a very, very short charge with his Courtesan of Sibaresh into the back of those fleeing Realm Knights, so that's a big let-off for me. Post moves, he moves his Hope Harvester into the back to try and get some shots off at the back of my Green Knight and potentially my Questing Knights. I can't remember which he shot, but he doesn't manage to do any damage, I don't think. The Lemuries on the left continue moving up to try and sit on that objective. Of course, that's the one that he's protecting rather than scoring. But, you know, making sure that that objective is safe from me. He moves up with the Veil Serpents and the Myrmidons up onto the hill, so they've got rerolls to charge next turn. And, of course, you know, 2 of my units here, and the Questing Knights are too far away to charge things. The Aspirants are going to have to rally next turn. You know, so he's in a good position for next turn's charges, potentially. Post-Magic, he gets Know Thine Enemy on the Miser in combat with the Might Duke, so he's now testing on Cold-Blooded on a minimised check. And he's also offensive and defensive 7, maybe 8. So make it a little bit more difficult for my Might Duke to hit him. Nothing happens in shooting, and post-combat, he manages to do a wound to my Might Duke. I think he issues a duel so that I can't kill off the Myrmidons to generate combat res. So he manages to get a single wound through. He's only strength 5 AP 2, and I've got a 1-up save with rerolling 1s. So he manages to get the 1 wound through there. Of course, I'm only strength 4 against his resilience 7, so I don't manage any wounds back. He has won combat by 4, though, so I have to make a Disciplines 5 check, which I managed to make, which now pins the Miser in place, with my Questing Knights and my Green Knight looking at a combat with 9 ablative wounds that I could potentially bring in combat res to pop the Miser now. So, you know, again, very lucky moment for me there. As we go into Equitane turn 4. So both the Aspirants and the both units of Realm Knights and the Aspirants all rally and turn around to face. I charge in with the Green Knight and the Questing Knights into the Myrmidons to try and generate combat res to save the Might Duke from the Miser. And I get the Grail Knights out of line of sight of the... or at least a long way away from the Courtesan of Sibaresh, so that it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him to charge me. And bearing down on his scoring units to try and protect that objective. Post-Magic, I managed to grow back a couple of Questing Knights, and I get Stone Skin off on my central unit of Realm Knights. Post-combat, I managed to do so many wounds to the poor Myrmidons that I wipe them out, which now means that it doesn't generate any additional combat res for the Miser, I believe. He also manages to sneak 1 more wound through on my Might Duke. I pursue through with the Green Knight, but I can't remember... yeah, so I think I managed to do 2 wounds with the Might Duke, even rolling on 6s, and then with the charges from the Green Knight, I generate enough combat res to make him fail his supernal check, and he takes another 3 wounds. So I think he's now on the 1 wound, maybe 2. So certainly it's looking a lot better than for me in that combat than it maybe should have done. I reform my Questing Knights to face up towards the Hope Harvester to stop it from coming around that corner. And also I can't see anything if I point any other direction. And we go to Demons turn 5. So he charges the Veil Serpents into the front of my Knights Aspirant just to pin them in place. Of course they've got Swift Stride, they're quite fast, so I'm not going to be able to kill them, and it's going to be difficult for me to pop them with Supernal, so that's just to pin them in place ready for the Courtesan to hit them in the side. It also stops them from charging into the flank of the Miser to finish off that, and the Myrmidons go into the front of the Realm Knights. The Hope Harvester, of course, wants nothing to do with my Questing Knights, so turns around to face the back of my Grails. And again, the Lemuries and the Blazing Glory on the left are continuing to move in towards the centre. Post-combat and post-magic, he manages to get Deceptive Glamour on the Aspirants, Smite the Unbeliever on my realms in with the Myrmidons, and he gets Know Thine Enemy on the Veil Serpents, which gives them bonuses for combat, and then he puts the attribute on the Miser of Segulag to try and keep that alive. He only I think we fight in a challenge with the Veil Serpents, and the Aspirant, he kills my champion, I hold or force him to take a check. Either way, that combat's basically a push. In combat with the Realms and the Myrmidons, he kills 2 of me, I kill 2 of him, he's got a charge, I've got a banner, so that combat's a push as well. And we go to Equitane, turn 5. So post charges, I go into the flank of the Myrmidons to support those realms, try and break them free so I can turn around and face the Blazing Glory. The quests can't see anything, the Grails can't see anything worth charging. I think they're actually slightly out of line of sight for those Myrmidons in the centre. With him reforming, it just takes him out of my line of sight. So post moves, I turn around the Grails to face the Hope Harvester. Nothing else can see me, so I don't need to worry about that. The Valour Duke moves out of that unit to face the Courtesan and potentially go in and provide more combat res on the Miser's combat. The quests turn around to face the Veiled Serpents. In post-combat, not an awful lot of magic goes off by the looks of things. I managed to kill off the rest of the Myrmidons in the centre. I turned the 3 remaining Realm Knights back towards the Courtesan. The Veiled Serpents kill another couple of Knights Aspirant, and the Miser and Might Duke continue slapping away at one another, not managing to do any more wounds. So Demon's turn 6. He declares a whole load of charges. The Blazing Glory goes into the unit of 3 Realm Knights, which I flee from. I go through a whole load of dangerous terrain. I take dangerous from the Miser and the Veiled Serpents and the Forest. I only lose 1 guy though, so they come out the other side. They don't panic my BSB, thankfully. So the Blazing Glory redirects into the other unit of Realm Knights who flee. The Courtesan goes into the flank of my Aspirants, and the Hope Harvester declares a charge into the front of my Grail Knights. Post moves and charges, he manages to make it in with the Courtesan because that was automatic, but the Hope Harvester rolls too low to make it in, and the Blazing Glory fails quite a long charge, so stumbles forward a couple of inches there. And that last unit of Myrmidons forms into a conga to try and stretch out and score the objective on the final turn. But I think at this point it was either too far away or if they failed a march check or something. Either way, he doesn't manage to make it all the way there. So post magic and combat, the Courtesan comes in, does a whole heap of wounds to the Aspirants. Thankfully I managed to hold that. I think with my BSB there, I can't remember how difficult of discipline check that I needed to make, but I do manage to hold it there. Ready for some counter charges on my turn. And in combat with the Miser and the Might Duke, I managed to roll a double 6 to wound him with my 3 hits or whatever, and I managed to cause the final wound and finally kill that Miser. So, huge boost for me there. Very lucky considering the Might Duke is pants in combat if he's not charging. So I really got away with it there, getting through the armor save and an Aegis save, so pretty brutal, very unlucky for the demons. And of course it then frees up my Might Duke for a charge next turn as well. So that's the end of Demon turn 6. We go to my turn 6, the final turn. So I need to move the Green Knight out of the way for the Might Duke to charge the flank of the Hope Harvester. I want to bring in extra combat res to try and kill the Courtesan, so I'll bring in my BSB for another banner into the flank of the Veiled Serpents. The Valour Duke also wants something to do, so he's going to charge into the flank, into the rear of the Veiled Serpents as well. The Might Duke now has space to charge into the flank of the Hope Harvester, and the Grail Knights are going to into the front of the Hope Harvester as well. I managed to make all of those charges. I think most of them were automatic. It was just the Might Duke that might have had a slightly longer one, but it causes fear, so that's fine. Post moves, I rally with the fleeing unit of Realm Knights, so they save their points, and the ones in the forest as well, so they're fine. Post magic, so I get Entwining Roots on the Courtesan. I regrow a wound on my Might Duke up there. I get Stone Skin off on the Aspirant Knights to try and keep them alive. And then through in combat, between my General, my BSB and the Green Knight, I wipe out the Veiled Serpents, so Bit of an oops there, because that means I no longer am causing as much combat res on the Courtesan. I only lose the one Knight Aspirant, and after combat res, the Courtesan takes 3 wounds, so it doesn't take enough for me to get half points or to kill it, unfortunately. But the Might Duke and the Grails, between them, they manage to make not quite as short work as you would hope, but they do manage to kill the Hope Harvester. So that's the end of the game. We've got a drawn objective. I've killed plenty of demons, and that leaves the score as a 17-3. He killed a whole... the scoreline there doesn't reflect how close the game was. I could have lost an awful lot more points than I really did. The Might Duke was, of course, very close to dying. The quests were brought down quite heavily. I nearly lost both of the units of realms, but they kept rallying. There was only 2 of them left in one of the units, so I really got away with some stuff in this game. The Might Duke in particular rolled very, very well in combat with the Miser. I rolled slightly above average to kill the Maw of a Khan as well, which put me up in the early game. So yeah, I'm happy with this army list now, ready to take it to the Scottish Championships. I think it's more or less decent. I think I switched around a couple of bits and pieces. We'll have a look at the next game to see what those were. Pleased to have done well against such a good player and army list. I think there were some changes that would have, in a tournament game, he would have paid more attention to my army list with the Wyrmwood Lance, and potentially not going into my Might Duke with the Miser. But yes, good game. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Yeah? Are you going to come and sit on my lap? Yeah? You got to be quiet, though. I'm going to put a... Yeah. Yes. I'm going to put a jumper on there. Because otherwise you'll get fluff all over me. Won't you, monster? Yes.